A couple months ago, I woke up early in the morning to a message from a near billionaire. He told me he loves living in Dubai, but he's frustrated with the new 9% tax rate that applies to his business. We told you that a lot of entrepreneurs who set up companies in Dubai's free zones are now subject to this 9% tax. And people push back saying, no, there's a simple workaround. But today I'm going to tell you the truth about Dubai's 9% tax. Now, before we get started, let me be clear about one thing. There's nothing wrong with paying 9% tax if Dubai or anywhere else in the UAE is a place that you want to live. Here at Nomad Capitalist, we help people legally reduce their taxes. Some people want to eliminate them. Some people are happy to reduce them. But we always keep lifestyle in mind. The UAE gives you a place where you can live as long as you want. You can live there every day of the year if you want, and you can pay what's still a pretty low rate of tax. So if Dubai is the place you want to go, and as long as you understand all the other tax-friendly countries you could move to that you are passing on to go to Dubai, we've helped our clients move to 31 of them, including some you've probably never heard of, like Italy or Greece. As long as you're clear about all the options and you decide Dubai is the place for you, nothing wrong with paying 9% tax. But the issue is, if you have a company in a UAE free zone, and now you're paying 9% tax for nothing, that's not only complicating your structure, because I generally think it's easier to pay personal tax and keep your business tax structure at zero. It creates a lot more neutrality. So if you went to the UAE in search of that 0% tax, a lot of entrepreneurs, we told you before, under the new rules that came out and were finalized in October, you're now paying 9%. And if you're not actually living in Dubai, why would you pay 9% when you could put your company in any number of other places? Heck, you could put your company in other places and then still go live in Dubai, although some of the rules they put in place prohibit that. We're going to get into that. So let's go through some of the misconceptions that people have thrown out when we told you, hey, a lot of businesses are going to pay 9% tax in Dubai. Definitely check out that episode, by the way, where we talk about this new rule in detail. I was on the radio in Dubai in 2022 when they announced, hey, this new 9% tax, it's going to be onshore. Free zones won't be affected. I actually thought they would keep the more tax exemptions on free zones for longer. But we were aware of this change back in mid-2022, and people in the UAE invited us to comment on it on places like the radio. That actually started in July 2023. So people have been saying, oh, this has been happening for some time. Yes, depending on how you set up and when you set up your company, really when you set it up, this could have started as early as July 2023. It also started as late as January 2024 for some others, depending on the way that the business was set up. Some of the biggest changes came, I think, rather quietly in October of 2023, and we actually got in touch with our clients who were affected. And basically what changed was that a lot of companies would pay this new 9% tax and that a lot fewer exemptions would exist in the free zones. So here's one of the first things that people said, well, don't worry about the 9% tax. Yes, it will apply to you, but there's a workaround. So here's one of the proposed workarounds. Just take a salary. So the UAE remains tax-free for individuals. Now, it's not tax-free if you have dividend income, royalty income from a book, a song, a YouTube channel. Those are taxed at source. And if that source doesn't have a tax treaty with the UAE, you may pay the highest withholding tax rate. So if all your money comes from dividends from U.S. stocks, the UAE is one of the worst places in the world you could live. But you're going to pay zero on income that you make from any kind of, personal business. And so people say, well, just take a salary. So let's say your company, earns a profit, just take it all out as salary. And then the salary comes as a tax deduction, right? Because I think one thing people have to understand when they're going offshore that they often don't understand in their home country is that you and your company are different entities. I think especially a lot of Americans who use LLCs don't get that. They look at it as kind of one pile of money. Your company is a profit. Your payment to yourself is taxable to you personally, which in the UAE, you want personal income. It's like in a lot of Western countries, the business is taxed better than the individual. In the UAE, it's flipped. So any personal income you can get is better. Now, first things first, if you are an American and you use the foreign earned income exclusion, which is the easiest way to reduce, what you've historically been able to do is move outside of the United States, set up a foreign company, often, in a zero tax jurisdiction is a good idea. Obviously, it's different for everybody, but a lot of Americans will set up in a zero tax jurisdiction, which the UAE was until recently. They would take out their foreign earned income exclusion between 9, 10, now it's getting close to $11,000 a month, a little less. And that foreign income exclusion gives you your income for free. Basically, no Social Security, no Medicare, none of that. But then the rest of the money had to stay in the company. But hey, it was zero. And then a while back, they changed it to where now you have to pay some basic level of tax. But hey, you're still paying pretty low tax. But if you take money out of that corporate structure, you're going to pay a much higher tax. So just taking a huge salary, let's say you run $1 million, $5 million company. If you're an American, you can't do that. You say, okay, great, I'm not an American. Well, let me give you a couple points. It's not ideal. So I talked to our tax researcher on our team. We have a team of 5.5 full-time people who are doing research all around the world. We have a network of tax experts all around the world. And we actually know what's going on in these different countries. And we actually know what you can do and what you can't do because it's not as simple as people think. So let's say you've got a company where you make a couple $1 million a year. While there is no specific provision that forces salaries to be quote unquote reasonable, number one, the general rule is that expenditure must be incurred wholly and exclusively for the purpose of the business. If the expenditure is incurred for non-business purposes, then it must be added back when calculating taxable income. Basically, and this is the case in a number of places in different wording, different names, you can't just treat the company like your personal piggy bank and take it all out and do things that are for your sole personal tax benefit. Moreover, UAE law further clarifies that expenditures not incurred for the purposes of the taxable person's business are not tax deductible. Number two, if the salary is artificially excessive, and that's the term, and does not reflect a legitimate and fair market compensation for work being performed by the shareholder, the expense could potentially no longer be considered wholly and exclusively for the business, for the purpose of the business, and therefore not fully tax deductible. Number three, furthermore, the UAE has put in place general anti-avoidance rules which target transactions in which there is no real economic or commercial purpose, meaning that transactions only take place for tax avoidance purposes. These rules could potentially also affect an excessive salary. Now, people are often looking for clear black and white on every part of their scenario in the tax world. And there are times when you'll have different tax professionals take different positions. Both can be equally good. They can cite their reasons. We have one particular issue in the U.S. We kind of have a war between kind of two sides of our tax professionals there where, one or two guys think this applies and the other ones all think they're an idiot. They're both professionals. And so somebody could say, hey, well, I don't think that a salary at a certain level is going to be excessive. The general provision, which is worth keeping in mind, is if you've got a company and you're making big money, again, a couple $1 million a year, what business that makes a couple $1 million a year would pay their CEO a couple $1 million a year? That's no longer a business. That's a personal piggy bank. And I think it's just in general, forget the tax part of it, which I think is going to be problematic. It's just a general thing that's bad for a business. That could come up in a litigation scenario, right? It's one thing perhaps to take dividends from a company, but a dividend comes post-tax, right? So you pay your corporate tax and then you take the money out as a dividend. And so you're still going to pay the tax rate in that case. And so if you're just taking out an excessive salary, somebody could argue, I think this is maybe more of an uphill argument in some jurisdictions from lawyers I've talked to, but hey, this guy doesn't run a company. He just has a slush fund. So I think generally the idea of just taking a salary is not the best idea. And so if you went to Dubai, again, because you liked it, that's fine. Stay there, pay the 9%. Does it get higher? Maybe a little bit. That's fine. I'll talk to you about some alternatives in a second. Again, understand that there are certain types of income that are not tax-free there, like royalties, like dividends. But if you are not living in the UAE, first of all, I think it's harder to run your company. They're not companies that are set up to be run remotely. A lot of people who are in Dubai, it's almost like in the US, wait a second, there's other countries out there. When I sold my house in the US and I said I wanted the money sent to Singapore, the person had never heard of Singapore. I think a lot of people in the UAE, they're fascinated by the fact that people choose to live other places than Dubai. Just come in and sign your papers. I'm not in Dubai. But why? It's just not good to run remotely. And I just think that the general philosophy, it's not tax advice, it's not all-encompassing, it's not for everybody, but it's kind of a general rule for myself. I'd much rather have a level of personal taxation that serves my lifestyle than have corporate taxation. I'd rather the corporation be tax neutral, and then I'd choose based on where I spend my time to pay tax to justify a lifestyle rather than the reverse. I think there's better places to go, starting with, I mean, you can move your company out of the UAE to any number of tax-free jurisdictions. Actually, our tax team just went through and did the most all-encompassing research we've ever had on all the different jurisdictions out there. And we found out that even some of the less well-regarded jurisdictions, we found some case studies of people that they might apply for, because you're seeing places like the Seychelles, for example, and other offshore jurisdictions increasing the amount of reporting requirements. And so, you know, there are use cases for BVI and Belize companies for certain kinds of businesses where those reporting requirements are still relatively minimal. So that's what Nomad Capitalist does, is help people figure out where to actually incorporate your business. If the answer is, I want to lower my taxes, the second thought shouldn't be Dubai, just because these guys all advertise on Instagram and tell you how easy it is. I had a company in the UAE, and it's one of the least easy companies I've ever had to manage. I'm not saying it was the worst thing I've ever done. I'm not saying the UAE is a bad place. I think it's a bit overhyped and overrated. And now it's coming at the expense of 9%. If you make, 100 grand a year, you're exempt. If you make 200 grand a year, pay a little bit of tax. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're making millions, is it worth it? Now, let's start with some other options. Non-dumb programs. Ireland, Malta, Cyprus, the UK, if you can find a way to live there. And I think Malta and Cyprus are among the easier ones. Ireland's flexible enough. You run your company offshore. Very flexible on where those companies are. So it's not like some of the other European countries where there's a big blacklist. Portugal had one of those up until when they whacked their tax program. You can put your company anywhere you want. Pay zero. The money you bring to the country is taxed. The money you keep out of the country is not taxed. And so again, if you're in that multi-million-dollar range and you're like me and you say, I like to live on a small percentage of my income, then that's only a small percentage of your income is taxed at very high rates, but overall works out to a relatively low rate. Ireland, easier to get citizenship. Malta and Cyprus, I think, harder, particularly Malta, to get citizenship. But at least if you live in one of these European countries, you can get a tax rate that's lower than 9%, because you make $5 million, you spend $500,000, right? So, maybe you pay a couple $100,000 in tax in the $5 million. Your rate is 4-5%. It's half the UAE rate, and in as little as 5 years, you could have one of the best passports in the world. By the way, people talk about Ireland. The weather's not as bad in a place like Dublin or somewhere on the East Coast as it is what you proverbially think of the West Coast. It's not raining every day in Ireland. Obviously, Malta and Cyprus are nice. So the UAE, you're not going to get citizenship unless you're Kevin O'Leary. In Ireland, and to a lesser extent Cyprus, you can probably pay about half the tax rate based on how you live. You don't have to live there full-time, the same way you might not live in Dubai full-time. Half the tax rate, and you get a top-tier citizenship. Spain has the Beckham tax. It's a bit more complicated for a lot of entrepreneurs. That's possible. If you want to live in a place like Spain, that's a longer process to get citizenship. But if you are from a Latin American country or the Philippines, or you're an American who was born in Puerto Rico, you could get citizenship in as little as 2 years. And so it might be worth the structuring in Spain to get a great passport with that. And potentially for some kind of businesses, again, you could be in that same bucket, paying a handful of percent, lower than Dubai's 9%, and getting citizenship. If you're just anyone else, it's going to be a much longer route to citizenship. Italy and other countries with lump sum programs. Again, if you're paying 100,000 euros a year flat, Switzerland, probably not attracting the same kind of clientele as Dubai, although perhaps. I don't know if you like the idea of living in Dubai, if you want to live in Lucerne or Geneva. If you can pay a lump sum in Italy, you might want to live in Milan. You could live in Lake Como. Milan's not my personal favorite, but it has some of the things you might like about Dubai. Passport in 10 years, so that's slower than one of the non-dom countries, but you're paying a lump sum, 100,000 euros. And so if you're spending more than a couple 100,000 euros to live every year, if you have the Ferraris, if you have the live-in chef, if you have the great lifestyle that attracted you to the UAE, you can do that more affordably. Let's say you make 5 million and you pay 100,000 euros. You have a 2% tax rate, and you're working towards citizenship. And most passports these days, you can go and spend up to 90 days as a tourist in the UAE. Heck, if you have a UAE structure, you might keep it and repurpose it as some kind of holding company for investments. There's any number of things that you could do. I'm not saying to cut the UAE out of your life, but what I'm saying is, in Europe, for example, you can pay half the price you'd pay and be working towards citizenship. If you want to live nomadically, you can probably get your taxes down to practically zero. There's many other countries in Central America, Eastern Europe, Asia, South America, you could pay 0, 1, 2%. And again, and some of them be working towards some very good passports. If you're the kind of person that wants to live in the UAE for the global feel and the low taxes and all that, you absolutely want a second passport. I can get you one in the Caribbean or in Malta or any of other places for as little as $100,000 and as little as a few months. But maybe that's not needed. Maybe you just go and live somewhere for 3, 5, 7 years and get a good passport because you're living there and paying 2% tax, which to them, they're happy to take your 2%. It's better than 9% for you. So this is what we do at Nomad Capitalist, and this is kind of the mindset that I go through if I'm talking to someone. Nothing against the UAE, but if you went there as the very wealthy gentleman that I told you about in the beginning, his goal was, let me just keep my corporate tax at 0. That's a great incentive because when you're making a lot of money, 9%, it's a lot. If you're paying millions a year in tax at 9%, are you getting millions of dollars in services? You're not getting citizenship. So, if you went there for that very low or non-existent rate of tax, the game's changed for most businesses. And so you don't have to say, well, 9% is not that much. That's one of the things people said, well, just pay your 9%. If you like it, pay the 9%. But if that's not what you would attracted you there, or if you went there just for the 0, but you would have rather lived in Italy, well, you know what? That near billionaire could pay less than 1% in Italy every year. Why would he not move to the place that actually he likes a little bit more for 90% less tax? And that's the thought process. Nothing wrong with paying 9% if you get value in your life. But I think a lot of people just followed the herd to the UAE, and now they turn the screws on you. If you want our help in either getting out of the UAE, or if you're looking for where to structure your company and you want a more holistic approach than just an Instagram ad saying, set up in the UAE, isn't it so amazing? Look at this girl holding a piece of paper. You can go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. You're going to pay more than you would pay somebody to set up a free zone company, but you're going to save more. And we're probably going to find some things that you haven't thought about, the unknown unknowns. For example, like the guy that I've talked about who didn't realize he has multi-six figures in royalty income that he's going to get the most punitive taxes on living in the UAE. We would have saved him that. And that would have more than covered his investment with us, let alone everything else we would have done for him. So nomadcapitalist.com/apply. Please don't take this as being against the UAE. I'm taking it as being deliberate in what you do, not to chase a location, but to chase an outcome.